John Harper was a man full of dreams, but his life wasn't turning out the way he had imagined. He lived in a small town with Emily, his wife, and for the first few years of their marriage, things were perfect. They laughed together, dreamed together, and faced challenges side by side. But as time went on, cracks began to appear in their relationship. Life became harder than either of them expected. Emily desperately wanted to start a family, but no matter how hard they tried, she couldn't get pregnant. The doctor said it might take time, but every month brought disappointment. For John, this felt like failure. He started blaming himself, not just for not being able to give Emily a child, but also for feeling stuck in a life that seemed to be going nowhere. Money was tight, and his job barely paid enough to cover their bills. Every day felt like a battle, and John grew more frustrated and distant. At first, Emily tried to comfort him. She reminded him that they still had each other, and that things would get better. But John stopped listening. Instead of leaning on her during tough times, he pushed her away. He spent long hours at work, avoiding home because it only reminded him of everything he thought he lacked. When he did come home, arguments became frequent. Small disagreements turned into shouting matches, leaving both of them exhausted. One particularly cold winter evening, the tension reached its peak. Emily had been crying earlier that day after another negative pregnancy test, and John snapped. "I can't do this anymore," he shouted, pacing back and forth in their tiny living room. "This isn't the life I wanted. I'm suffocating here." Emily looked at him, tears streaming down her face. "We're in this together, John," she pleaded. "Why are you giving up?" But John wasn't listening. His mind was made up. Without thinking about the consequences, he grabbed his coat and stormed out of the house. He didn't know where he was going or what he would do next. All he knew was that he needed to escape. As he drove away, he glanced in the rearview mirror and saw Emily standing in the doorway, watching him leave. Her expression haunted him. Hurt, confusion, and sadness all rolled into one. But he kept driving anyway. For days, John stayed with a friend, trying to convince himself that leaving was the right choice. He told himself that he needed space, that starting over somewhere else would fix everything. Deep down, though, doubt crept in. Was running away really the answer? Could he ever forgive himself for walking out on the woman he once loved so deeply? Meanwhile, Emily was left to pick up the pieces. Alone in their quiet home, she replayed their last conversation over and over in her mind. She wondered if there was something she could have done differently to keep him from leaving. But despite her pain, she refused to let despair consume her. Little did John know, his decision to leave would set off a chain of events neither of them could have predicted. And one day, it would bring them face to face again in ways neither of them could imagine. After leaving Emily, John packed his bags and moved to a bustling city hundreds of miles away. He told himself it was a fresh start, a chance to leave behind the struggles that had weighed him down for so long. At first, everything seemed exciting. The city buzzed with energy, and opportunities felt endless. John threw himself into his work, determined to prove to himself, and maybe even to Emily, that he could succeed on his own. His new job demanded long hours, but John didn't mind. In fact, he welcomed the distraction. Being busy kept his mind off the guilt gnawing at the edges of his thoughts. Late nights at the office became his routine, and slowly he climbed the ladder of success. Within a few years, he earned promotions, bought a sleek apartment, and started earning a salary that would have been unimaginable back in his old life. On paper, John appeared to have it all: a thriving career, financial stability, and independence. But no matter how much he achieved, something always felt missing. Nights were the hardest. After a day filled with meetings and deadlines, John often found himself sitting alone in his apartment, staring out the window at the glittering skyline. It was during those quiet moments that memories of Emily crept in, her laughter, her kindness, the way she used to hold his hand when they walked together. He tried to push those thoughts aside, telling himself he had made the right choice. But deep down, He couldn't shake the feeling that he had left behind more than just a struggling marriage. Occasionally, John wondered about Emily. How was she doing? Had she moved on? Did she hate him for leaving? These questions lingered in the back of his mind, but pride stopped him from reaching out. What would he even say? Sorry I abandoned you. The thought paralyzed him. Instead, he convinced himself that she was better off without him. Maybe she had found someone else, someone who could give her the life she deserved. To fill the emptiness, John dated casually. He went out with women he met through work or mutual friends, but none of the relationships ever lasted long. Something always felt off. No matter how charming or intelligent the woman across the table might be, John couldn't connect with them the way he once had with Emily. Conversations felt forced, and he constantly compared them to the warmth and comfort he'd shared with his ex-wife. Eventually, he stopped trying altogether, resigning himself to solitude. As the years passed, John began to notice subtle changes in himself. The ambitious young man who had arrived in the city full of determination now seemed older, wearier. Success hadn't brought him the happiness he'd expected. If anything, it only highlighted what he had lost. Friends noticed too. You've got everything you wanted, one colleague remarked over drinks one evening. Why do you still look like you're carrying the weight of the world? John didn't have an answer. All he knew was that despite his achievements, he couldn't escape the nagging sense that he had taken the wrong path. Somewhere along the way, he had traded love and connection for ambition and material gain. And now, he wasn't sure if he could ever find his way back. Little did John realize, fate had other plans. Unbeknownst to him, the choices he had made, and the ones Emily had made in his absence, were about to collide in ways that would change both their lives forever. Though John remained unaware, pieces of his past were waiting just around the corner, ready to remind him of the family he had left behind, and the second chance he never thought possible. Years had passed since John left Emily, and he had almost convinced himself that his old life was just a distant memory. But fate has a way of catching up with people when they least expect it. One evening, John attended a charity gala hosted by his company. It was a glamorous event held in a grand ballroom, filled with elegant decorations, soft music, and guests dressed in their finest attire. John didn't particularly enjoy these kinds of gatherings, but as a rising star in his firm, he felt obligated to attend. As he mingled awkwardly among the crowd, nursing a glass of champagne, something, or rather, someone, caught his eye across the room. At first, he thought his mind was playing tricks on him. Standing near a display table covered with photographs and informational flyers was a woman who looked strikingly familiar. Her hair was styled differently now, and she carried herself with a quiet confidence that John hadn't seen before, but there was no mistaking her face. It was Emily. For a moment, John froze, unsure if he should approach her or slip away unnoticed. Before he could decide, their eyes briefly met. For a split second, John thought he saw recognition flicker in her expression, but then she turned away, seemingly uninterested in acknowledging him. Relieved yet unsatured, John hesitated for a moment before curiosity got the better of him. What was she doing here? And why did she seem so different? He wandered over to the display table where Emily had been standing. There, amidst colorful posters showcasing various community projects, was a collection of framed photographs. One picture, in particular, stopped him in his tracks. It showed 4 children, quadruplets, all identical, with wide smiles and sparkling eyes. They were undeniably Emily's kids, but what struck John most was how much they resembled him. Their features, the shape of their noses, the curve of their lips, even the mischievous glint in their eyes, were unmistakably his own. John's heart began to race. His mind scrambled to make sense of what he was seeing. How could this be? Had Emily remarried? Was there someone else in her life who had given her the family she always wanted? Or could these children possibly be his? The thought sent a wave of emotions crashing over him. Shock, guilt, regret, and an overwhelming sense of loss. He had missed so much, Years of birthdays, holidays, and everyday moments that could never be reclaimed. Feeling overwhelmed, John stepped back from the table, trying to steady himself. He glanced around the room, searching for Emily again, but she was nowhere to be found. She must have slipped out while he was lost in thought. For the rest of the evening, John barely paid attention to the event. His mind was consumed with questions. Who were those children? What kind of life had Emily built without him? And most importantly, what was he supposed to do now? The weight of his absence pressed heavily on him as he drove home that night. Images of the quadruplets kept flashing in his mind, each one a reminder of the family he had walked away from. For years, John had told himself that leaving was the right decision, that Emily would be better off without him. But now, faced with undeniable proof of the life she had created, he couldn't ignore the truth any longer. He had made a terrible mistake, and somehow he needed to find a way to make things right. But how? That question lingered in his mind as he lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. Little did John know, this chance encounter was only the beginning of a journey that would force him to confront his past, and perhaps give him an opportunity to rebuild what he had lost. The days following the charity gala were a blur for John. He couldn't stop thinking about Emily and the quadruplets. Their faces haunted him. Those 4 sets of eyes that mirrored his own. Those smiles that seemed to silently ask, "Where have you been?" It was as if the universe had conspired to show him exactly what he had given up, and now he couldn't unsee it. The guilt weighed on him like a stone sinking deeper into water. At first, John tried to push the thoughts aside. He told himself it wasn't his business anymore. Emily had clearly moved on, built a life without him, and raised 4 beautiful children. What right did he have to barge back into her world after all these years? But no matter how hard he tried to distract himself with work or late-night TV, the image of those kids kept creeping back into his mind. They deserved answers, didn't they? Didn't they deserve to know who their father was? Finally, John decided he couldn't ignore this any longer. He needed to see Emily again, even if it meant facing her anger, or worse, her indifference. The problem was, he didn't know how to reach out. After so many years apart, calling her directly felt impossible. Instead, he turned to mutual friends from their old town, people who might still be in touch with her. At first he hesitated, worried about looking desperate or foolish. But eventually, his need for answers outweighed his pride. Through a former colleague who had stayed close to Emily, John learned she lived nearby and occasionally attended community events like the one he'd seen her at. With some reluctance, the friend agreed to pass along a message. John wanted to meet her, not to cause trouble, but simply to catch up. To his surprise, Emily responded. She said she would meet him at a quiet cafe downtown, provided he understood this wasn't about rekindling anything. It was strictly a casual conversation. As the meeting approached, John's nerves grew worse. He replayed every possible scenario in his head. What if she refused to speak to him? What if she blamed him for everything that went wrong? What if she laughed in his face and told him he had no place in her life or in her children's lives? Each thought made his stomach churn, but deep down, he knew he had to try. This wasn't just about him anymore. Those kids deserved to know the truth, and if there was even a small chance he could make things right, he owed it to them, and to Emily, to take it. On the day of the meeting, John arrived at the cafe early. He ordered a coffee and sat by the window, nervously tapping his fingers against the table. When Emily walked in, his breath caught in his throat. She looked different somehow, stronger, more composed than the woman he remembered. There was a calmness about her that hadn't been there before, a sense of resilience that came from weathering storms alone. She spotted him immediately and walked over, her expression unreadable. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, with a polite nod, she sat down across from him. Up close, John noticed faint lines around her eyes and mouth, signs of the years she had endured without him. He wanted to apologize right then and there, to pour out every ounce of regret he had carried for so long. But instead, he forced himself to stay calm. "Thanks for meeting me," he began, his voice quieter than he intended. "I wasn't sure you'd agree." Emily studied him for a moment before responding. "I wasn't sure I should," she admitted honestly. "But curiosity got the better of me." Her words stung, but John couldn't blame her. He had left her when she needed him most, and now here he was, asking for her time again. Still, he pressed on. "I saw you at the gala the other night," he said carefully, "and I saw the pictures of your kids. They're amazing, Emily. You must be so proud." A flicker of emotion crossed her face, but she quickly masked it. "They are my pride and joy," she replied simply. "Raising them hasn't been easy, but they've made every struggle worth it." John nodded, swallowing hard. Do they know about me?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. Emily paused, considering her answer. "They know they have a father," she said finally. "But beyond that," she trailed off, leaving the rest unsaid. The silence between them stretched, heavy with unspoken questions and emotions. John realized this wouldn't be an easy conversation, but it was a start, a step toward uncovering the truth and perhaps finding a way to heal old wounds. Whatever happened next, he knew one thing for certain. His life was about to change in ways he couldn't yet imagine. The cafe was quiet, save for the soft hum of conversations at neighboring tables and the occasional clink of a spoon against a coffee cup. John sat across from Emily, his heart pounding as he waited for her to continue. She had just confirmed what he feared most. The quadruplets were his children, and they knew little, or perhaps nothing, about him. The weight of that realization hit him like a tidal wave, leaving him speechless. Emily seemed to sense his turmoil because she sighed deeply before speaking again. "After you left," she began, her voice steady but tinged with sadness, "I found out I was pregnant with quadruplets. Can you imagine? 4 babies all at once." She gave a small, humorless laugh, shaking her head. "It was overwhelming, to say the least. Raising them alone wasn't easy, but I didn't have a choice. You weren't there." Her words cut through John like a knife. He lowered his gaze, unable to meet her eyes. "Emily, I don't even know where to begin apologizing," he stammered. "If I had known, if I'd stayed, I would have been there for you, for them. I can't undo what I did, but I want you to know how sorry I am." Emily studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. Finally, she spoke. "Do you remember why you left, John?" she asked softly. "You said you felt trapped, suffocated by our life together. Do you still feel that way?" John hesitated, searching for the right words. "I thought leaving would fix everything," he admitted. "I convinced myself that starting over somewhere else would make me happy, but it didn't. No matter how much success I achieved, I always felt empty. Seeing those kids, the ones who looked so much like me, it made me realize what I gave up, what I threw away." Emily nodded slowly, her face softening just a fraction. "They're incredible, John. Sophia is the leader, always looking out for her siblings. Liam has your stubborn streak. He never gives up on anything. Ava is creative and kind, always drawing or writing stories. And Noah," she smiled faintly, "Noah is the dreamer. He asks questions about everything, especially about you." John's chest tightened. "What do you tell him?" he asked quietly. "I tell them the truth, that their father loved them very much but couldn't be part of their lives," Emily replied. Her tone wasn't accusatory, but it carried a quiet firmness that made John wince. "But now that you're here, I think they deserve to hear it from you." The idea terrified John. How could he explain himself to 4 children who barely knew him? What could he possibly say to justify his absence? Yet, deep down, he knew Emily was right. These were his kids, and they deserved answers, even if those answers weren't perfect. "I want to meet them," John said suddenly, surprising even himself. "Not to replace anything or disrupt their lives, but maybe to try and make things right, even if it's just a little bit." Emily considered this, her brow furrowing slightly. They've grown up without you, John. They might not understand why you left, and they might not trust you right away. Are you prepared for that? John nodded solemnly. I know I messed up, Emily. I don't expect forgiveness overnight, or ever. But if there's any chance I can be part of their lives, even in a small way, I owe it to them to try. For the first time since their meeting began, Emily's guard seemed to drop. She looked at him with something resembling hope mixed with caution. Okay, she said finally. We'll take it slow. I won't promise anything, but I'll let them decide if they want to get to know you. Relief washed over John, though he knew this was only the beginning of a long and uncertain journey. As they parted ways later that afternoon, he couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope, a fragile thread connecting him to the family he had abandoned years ago. For the first time in a long while, John felt like he had a purpose worth fighting for. The days leading up to John's first meeting with the Quadruplets felt like an eternity. He replayed every possible scenario in his mind, imagining how they might react to him. Would they be curious, angry, indifferent? The uncertainty gnawed at him, but he tried to focus on what Emily had said. Take it slow. This wasn't about rushing into their lives. It was about earning their trust, one small step at a time. When the day finally arrived, John arrived at Emily's house feeling both excited and terrified. She had invited him over for a casual family dinner, explaining that it would be easier for the kids to meet him in a comfortable setting rather than somewhere formal. As he stood on the porch, adjusting his tie for the 10th time, he heard laughter coming from inside the house. It was a warm, lively sound that made his heart ache with longing and regret. Emily opened the door with a polite smile. They're in the living room, she said softly, stepping aside to let him in. Just go easy, okay? John nodded, swallowing hard as he followed her inside. The sight of the Quadruplets took his breath away. They were sitting on the floor, surrounded by board games and snacks, their identical faces lighting up the room. For a moment, John simply stared, overwhelmed by how much they resembled him. The same dark hair, the same sharp jawline, even the same mischievous glint in their eyes. Kids, Emily called gently, drawing their attention. This is John. He's someone special who wants to get to know you. The children exchanged curious glances before turning their attention to him. Sophia, the eldest, tilted her head slightly, studying him with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Are you our dad? She asked bluntly, cutting straight to the point. John froze, caught off guard by her directness. His throat tightened, but he forced himself to answer honestly. Yes, I am, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. But I haven't been around because, well, that's something we can talk about if you'd like. Liam frowned, crossing his arms over his chest. Why weren't you here? He demanded, his tone sharp. We've been doing fine without you. John winced but nodded. You're right. You have done amazing without me, and I'm so proud of all of you. But I want you to know that I left because I thought I was making things better, not realizing I was actually making them worse. I made a mistake, and I'm really sorry for that. Ava, the quietest of the four, spoke up hesitantly. Do you want to stay now? She asked, her big brown eyes searching his face for answers. John knelt down to their level, wanting to appear approachable. I do, he admitted, but only if you're okay with it. I don't expect anything. I just want to be someone who supports you, listens to you, and maybe gets to share some fun times together. Noah, ever the dreamer, leaned forward eagerly. Will you play games with us? He asked, holding up a box of Monopoly. John chuckled, relief washing over him. Absolutely, he promised. And I'll probably lose horribly, but that's okay. The tension in the room eased slightly as the kids exchanged amused glances. Over dinner, they peppered him with questions. What his job was, where he lived, why he liked basketball. A topic Noah brought up after noticing John's sneakers. At first, John felt nervous, worried he might say the wrong thing or disappoint them. But as the evening went on, he found himself relaxing, enjoying their energy and personalities. By the end of the night, John realized this wouldn't be easy. There were still walls to break down, trust to rebuild, and countless moments to make up for. But for the first time in years, he felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be, with his children, taking the first steps toward being the father they deserved. Over the next few months, John slowly became a regular presence in the Quadruplets' lives. At first, his visits were tentative, quick stops after school or brief appearances at soccer games and piano recitals. But as time passed, the kids grew more comfortable around him, and John found himself eagerly looking forward to every moment he spent with them. He wasn't trying to replace anyone. He just wanted to be there, to listen, to laugh, and to learn what it truly meant to be a father. Sophia, the leader of the group, was the hardest to win over. She had always taken care of her siblings and viewed John's sudden reappearance with skepticism. "You left us once," she pointed out one afternoon while they were working on a puzzle together. "What if you do it again?" John paused, setting down the puzzle piece he'd been holding. Her words stung, but he knew she had every right to ask. "I can't promise I'll never make another mistake, Sophia," he admitted honestly. "But I can promise that I'm not going anywhere this time. You're my family, and I want to be part of your life. For real." To his relief, Sophia didn't argue further. Instead, she gave him a small nod, silently accepting his answer. For now. Liam, the fiercely independent one, tested John constantly. Whether it was challenging him to races at the park or debating everything from science facts to movie plots, Liam seemed determined to prove he didn't need anyone, even his dad. Yet beneath his tough exterior, John could see glimpses of vulnerability. During one particularly heated game of basketball, Liam tripped and scraped his knee. Before John could even react, Liam brushed off the injury with a muttered, "I'm fine." But when John knelt beside him and said quietly, "It's okay to admit when something hurts," Liam hesitated, and then let John help clean the scrape. Ava, the creative soul, warmed up to John faster than the others. She loved showing him her drawings and stories, often asking for his opinion. One evening, she handed him a notebook filled with sketches of their family, including one of him standing beside Emily and the kids. "Do you think we could all go somewhere together someday?" she asked shyly. "Like a vacation?" John smiled, touched by her hopeful tone. "I'd love that," he replied sincerely. "We'll figure it out, Ava. Together." Noah, the dreamer, was perhaps the easiest to connect with. His endless curiosity and boundless energy reminded John so much of himself that it sometimes brought tears to his eyes. On weekends, they started a tradition of watching old movies together, pausing frequently so Noah could pepper him with questions about everything from dinosaurs to space travel. "Did you know astronauts eat freeze-dried ice cream?" Noah announced one day, holding up a crumbly block triumphantly. John laughed, ruffling his hair. "That's awesome, buddy. Maybe someday we'll visit NASA." Emily watched all of this unfold with cautious optimism. While she appreciated John's efforts, she remained guarded, unwilling to let her guard down completely. Still, she couldn't deny the positive changes in her children. They laughed more, shared stories about Dad at dinner, and even started asking when he'd visit next. It was clear that John's presence was filling a void none of them had realized existed. For John, these moments were bittersweet. Every smile, every hug, every shared joke felt like a gift, but also a reminder of the years he'd missed. He threw himself into being present, helping with homework, cheering at sports events, and even learning how to braid hair for Ava's dance performances. Slowly but surely, trust began to grow, not just between him and the kids, but also between him and Emily. One evening, as they sat together on the porch after the kids had gone to bed, Emily broke the silence. "They're starting to believe in you, John," she said softly. "Don't let them down." Her words weren't harsh, but they carried weight, a quiet warning wrapped in hope. John nodded, meeting her gaze. "I won't," he promised. "Not again." As the stars twinkled above them, John realized something profound. Rebuilding a family wasn't about erasing the past. It was about creating a future worth fighting for. And for the first time in years, he felt ready to take on whatever came next. As the months turned into years, John's role in his children's lives became more defined and more meaningful. He wasn't just a visitor anymore. He was their dad. The quadruplets no longer questioned whether he'd stick around. They simply accepted him as part of their world, flaws and all. Sophia still teased him about losing at board games. Liam challenged him to races he sometimes won. Ava proudly showed off her latest art projects, and Noah bombarded him with endless questions that often left them both laughing. John knew he couldn't undo the past, but he worked tirelessly to make up for lost time. On weekends, they went hiking, visited museums, or had movie marathons with popcorn and candy. During school events, John sat proudly in the audience, cheering louder than anyone else. When report cards came home, he celebrated their achievements, big or small, with ice cream sundaes. These moments weren't extravagant, but they were filled with love and connection, slowly stitching together the fabric of a family that had once been torn apart. Emily, too, began to soften toward John. While she never fully reopened her heart to him romantically, she recognized the effort he put into being present for their children. Their relationship evolved into something new, a partnership built on mutual respect and shared responsibility. They communicated openly, planned holidays together, and even attended parent-teacher conferences as a team. It wasn't perfect, but it worked for the sake of the kids. One summer, John suggested taking the family on a trip, a week-long adventure to a lakeside cabin. At first, Emily hesitated, unsure if it was too soon for such a big step. But when the kids begged her with wide eyes and hopeful smiles, she agreed. The vacation turned out to be magical. Days were spent fishing, swimming, and roasting marshmallows by the fire. Nights were filled with stargazing and storytelling. For the first time in years, they felt like a real family, not fractured or incomplete, but whole. During one quiet evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, John found himself sitting beside Emily on the dock. The kids were playing tag nearby, their laughter echoing across the water. "Thank you," he said softly, breaking the peaceful silence. "For what?" Emily asked, glancing at him curiously. "For letting me come back," he replied. "For giving me a second chance with them, and with you." Emily smiled faintly, her gaze drifting toward the kids. "They needed you, John. We all did, in our own way." Her words stayed with him long after the trip ended. Back home, life continued its steady rhythm. John remained an active presence, juggling work and family with a dedication he'd never shown before. His career still mattered, but it no longer consumed him. Instead, his focus shifted to creating memories, helping Sophia practice for her school play, teaching Liam how to fix a flat tire, encouraging Ava during art competitions, and answering Noah's endless stream of what-if questions. The journey wasn't without challenges. There were days when old wounds resurfaced, moments when doubt crept in, and times when balancing everyone's needs felt overwhelming. But through it all, John held on to one truth. Redemption wasn't about perfection. It was about persistence. Every hug, every bedtime story, every "I'm proud of you" brought him closer to the family he had almost lost forever. Years later, as the quadruplets prepared to graduate high school, John looked at them with pride and gratitude. They had grown into remarkable young adults, each carving their own path while staying close to one another. As they stood together for photos, John couldn't help but notice how much they resembled not just him, but also Emily. Together, they had created something beautiful: resilience, love, and hope. In the end, John realized that true fulfillment came not from chasing success or running away from problems, but from embracing the messy, imperfect beauty of family. He hadn't just rebuilt his relationship with his children. He had rediscovered himself along the way. And though the scars of the past would always remain, they served as reminders of how far he'd come and how much he had to cherish moving forward.